Alright, welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to be designing a sidebar navigation, which usually shows up on mobile screen devices. So if I make this smaller, it's going to hide the links and it's going to show up a menu icon. When you click on it, it opens the sidebar and as well closes it. Now, this kind of sidebar is known as an overlay sidebar. That's because it shows on top of the content. We're also going to implement that which pushes the content to the side. Now, a sidebar navigation will usually come as a component with most front-end UI framework, but it's good you understand that this works, especially if you're writing your CSS from scratch or you're working with a utility for CSS framework like Tailwind CSS. So let's get started. Alright, so this is what our file structure looks like. It contains three files: the index.html, the script.js, and the styles.css. So go ahead and create those. We'll be starting with the index.html. We include our boilerplate code, !enter, and we'll name this side nav. First, we'll wrap everything in a div container. And within the container, we are going to create a header element. Within that, we're going to create a nav element with a class of top nav. Next, we are going to create a span with a class of logo. And we'll type a name there. Next, we are going to create an unordered list, which will contain the list of links. For the first, this is going to be home. I'll just duplicate this. The second is going to be services. And next, we are going to have pricing. And next, we are going to have about. Next, we are going to create the buttons for the menu icon. We're going to be creating this with a class of nav control and also show, which will make this show by default. And we're going to give this an ID of open nav. Within the button, we are going to be using an icon from Heroes icon. And I'll just search for menu. And this is the icon we'll be using. We'll copy the SVG and we'll paste that here. Next, we'll be creating the second button with a class of nav control as well and an ID of close nav. And the icon we'll be using for this is close. We'll copy the SVG as well and we'll paste that. We can go ahead and close this now. Next, we are going to create a div with a class of side nav for the sidebar navigation. And within that, we're going to create the list of links that we created before. So I'll just copy that and paste it. Next, we'll create the main session, which will have a div within that with a class of page content. And we'll just type content here. Alright, so let's load that and see how it looks like. Open with live server. Okay. Alright, so let's include our script file. And also the CSS. Okay, so we can move to the styling now. Alright, so first we are going to do a couple of resetting using the universal selector. We'll reset the margin to 0 pixels, the padding to 0 pixels, and the box sizing to border box. Save. Next, we are going to apply a font to the body. Font family, and we'll go with Sego UI. Next, we are going to give it a color of dark gray. Next, we are going to target the unordered list. And we're going to set the list style to none. Next, we'll target the links. And for the links, we want the text decoration to be none. I want to change the display to block. And the padding, we want to give it 10 pieces all around. Save. Alright. So next, we'll target the top nav. And for the top nav, we are going to give it a position of relative. And that's because we want to position the side nav fixed within the top nav. Next, we're going to give it a display of flex. Okay. and we'll justify the content and we are going to set it to space between and align item center. Okay. Next, we'll give it a box shadow. And for the X and Y offset, we're going to give it 0 pixels. We're going to give it 10 pixels for the blur. And for the spread, we're going to give it 2 pixels. And the color we are using is a gray color. Okay. Next, we're going to give it a font size of 18 pixels and a padding of 0 and 20 pixels. Save. We're going to give it a height of 60 pixels. Alright. And a Z index of 10. Now the Z index determines the order of overlapping an element has to prevent other elements from showing on top of it. So next, we are going to target the name within the top nav, which will give a class of logo. I want to transform the text to uppercase and give it a font weight of 900. Next, we're going to target the list. I want to change the display to inline block. Now we can target the links within it. I want to change the colors to a dark gray. Okay. Next, we want to change the font weight to 600 and give it a transition of 0.3 seconds. And that's because we'll be giving it a transform property on the over state. So on over, I want to change the color, and the color code is 4B62C5. Okay. So next, we want to transform and we want to scale this up by 1.1. Okay, let's check that out. And yes, the links works as expected. So we can go ahead now and style the menu icons. And we'll give that a class of nav control. So top nav and nav control. Now I want to give this a width of 35 pixels. Okay, now it shows up. And I want to change the cursor to a pointer and give it a background of transparent. Save. Next, we want to remove the border. None. So we'll give it an overstate next. I'll just copy this. And on over, we just want to change the color. Okay. Alright. So for now, we don't want the menu icons or buttons to be showing. So we'll give it a display of none. And that will push the links to the end. That's because we gave the top nav a justified content of space between. Now we can go ahead and style the side nav. And we're going to give it a position of fixed. And that's because we want it to be fixed on the screen so it doesn't scroll with the page content. Next, we change the background color to 1F295A. Okay. Now let's set the top position to 0 and left 0. Okay. Let's give it a width of 220 pixels and a height of 100%. Next, we'll give it a Z index of 20, so it's higher than that of the top nav. Okay. And we'll make the overflow hidden on the x-axis to prevent the scroll bars from showing. So next, we'll target the links. And for the links, we are going to change the color to a lighter gray and give it a transition of 0.5 seconds. We are going to give it an overstate as well and we are going to change the background color to 4B62C5. Okay. Next, we'll give the unordered list a margin to the top. Margin to the top of 50 pixels. Okay. And we'll test align center. Okay. Next, we'll target the list within the unordered list. I'll give it a padding of 5 pixels top bottom and 0 pixels left and right. We'll give it a font size of 20 pixels. Great. And a font weight of 500. And lastly, we'll give it a width of 100%. Okay, let's go ahead and test this out. All right. Next, we'll target the page content. So we'll give it a background color of F2, F6, FF. Okay, we'll give it a min height. And for the min height, we're going to be using the CSS calc function. We're going to give it a 100 viewport height, and we'll subtract the 60 pixels that we'll give to the top nav. Save. Okay. So next, we'll give it a display of flex. And we'll justify content center and align item center. Okay. And we'll give it a font size of 22 pixels, font weight, bold, and the color 777. All right. So next, we are going to give it a media query. On maximum width of 576 pixels. And we want the unordered list within the top nav to have a display of none, which will hide the links. And also, we want the nav control with a class of show to have a display of block. Okay, so if we test that out by making this smaller, you see that it hides the links and the menu button shows up. But right now there is no functionality because we've not implemented that with the JavaScript. Alright, so let's go ahead with the JavaScript. Alright, so first in the JavaScript file, we'll select the Open Nav button. And we'll use the document query selector. I'll be selecting with ID, and the ID is Open Nav. So we'll duplicate this, and this will be close nav. And we'll change the variable name, close nav. Alright, so next we'll select the side nav itself. I'll be selecting using the class of side nav. Alright, so next we are going to create a function that determines which nav button shows at a time. And what we are going to do is that we are going to get the class list of each button and toggle the show class. I will do that for the close nav button as well. Okay. Alright, so next we're going to create a function that opens the side navigation bar. I'll name this Open Nav. And within the function, first we'll call the toggle nav button. And next, the way we want to achieve this is by extending or making the width of the side nav to 20 pixels. Okay, which means by default the width is going to be 0 pixels. So let's go back to the styles and change that. And we'll give this a transition as well on width, and we'll give it 0.5 seconds. Alright, so next we're going to create the function to close the site nav. I'll just copy this and I'll change the name of the function to close nav. And for the width, I want to make that 0. Next, we'll create the event listeners for the button. So for the open nav button, I want to add an event listener. And on click, we want to invoke the open nav function. We'll do that as well for the close nav. And we'll change the button to close nav button. Alright, so let's check this out. And yes, it works. So when I click on the icon, it opens, and when I click again, it closes. Now this is an overlay sidebar because it appears on top of the content. To make it push the content to the side, what we are going to do is, first of all, we are going to get this div with a class of container which wraps everything within the HTML file. And to do that, we'll just go underneath this and we'll name this container, and the class is container. So what we are going to do is, within the open nav, we are going to give the container a margin to the left of 220 pixels as well. And within the close nav, we'll make that 0. Alright, let's test this out. Okay, now the transition of the container and that of the side nav is out of sync. So let's go to the styles. And within here, let's give the container a transition of 0.5 seconds. And let's try that again. Alright, and that works as expected. Alright, so that's it for this video. If you have any question, you can ask in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like. See you in the next video.